Good morning from the Freedom of Information and Privacy Association. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, and this is your Access and Privacy Online news summary for Saturday, May 3rd. Our condolences go out to everyone in the Filipino community and Vancouver, affected by the tragic events of April 26th. Off the top, the dust is still settling on the federal election, and we'll see the first of the Code of Silence Awards being handed out. We'll look at important stories impacting access to information, privacy, and information management across Canada and around the world. And we'll wrap up with a concerning development in British Columbia, where Northern Health Authority is being taken to court by an independent office of the legislature, signaling a troubling breakdown in transparency and accountability. Let's dive in. We start today with a look at the recent Canadian federal election. Paige Peacock, LGI reporter at The Pointer, reports on nomination irregularities among the Conservatives in Ontario, with sources saying widespread frustration among members damaged the chances of flipping seats in Mississauga. This was after the Conservatives thought they would cruise to an easy victory, having opened up a 20-point-plus lead, with polls showing large Tory advantages in the city before Justin Trudeau stepped down. FIPA's federal election survey showed responding candidates agree in principle to strengthening access and privacy laws. However, the Green Party was the only party to respond directly to the FIPA questionnaire, emphasizing clearer transparency measures, calling specifically for proactive disclosure and stronger protection of personal information. As voters and advocacy groups digest these results, it's clear that accountability and information access will remain key issues in Canadian politics. Be sure to check out our election commentary and the show notes for links to all this material. The Code of Silence Awards are starting to roll out. Transparency advocates have delivered a sharp critique to the Canadian government this week, awarding the federal government the dubious Code of Silence Award for obstructing access to residential school records. The Code of Silence Awards call attention to government or publicly funded agencies that work hard to hide information, to which the public has a right under access to information legislation. This unwelcome recognition from the Centre for Free Expression and the Canadian Association of Journalists, or the CAJ, highlights ongoing governmental resistance to releasing sensitive historical documents. The Truth and Reconciliation Commission found significant evidence of a cultural genocide being committed against Indigenous peoples. Despite this, according to the CAJ, the federal government continues to expend considerable efforts to prevent communities from accessing valuable documents that attest to the details of this truth. Meanwhile, Ontario's so-called Emailgate scandal involving the Greenbelt lands was similarly recognized, underscoring continued challenges in obtaining timely and truthful disclosures from public authorities. This was after a senior Ford government staffer implicated in Ontario's Greenbelt scandal refused to hand over emails that may have been sent from a personal email account to other government staffers and lobbyists interested in developing the protected land. These awards starkly remind us why transparency and accountability remain critical in public governance. FIPA was pleased to forward its nominees and looks forward to seeing who else receives recognition for their dubious actions. Turning to regional access to information issues, Ontario is considering a controversial change that could shorten the length of teacher training at colleges. Documents obtained through information requests reveal concerns over the potential impacts on teaching standards and transparency in educational oversight. This potential change would be to address a worsening shortage of educators. The reasoning is that there is little evidence that the amount of coursework in initial teacher education makes a difference in teachers' effectiveness when they enter the profession. However, it appears that in-class experience does make a difference. In Saskatchewan, from Ryan Kajowski, LJ reporter at the World Spectator, representatives from Canadian Union of Public Employees, or CUPE, recently confronted Esterhazy Town Council over restricted access to public meeting records. This incident underscores an ongoing debate about openness in local government decision-making. After being denied the chance to speak at a meeting earlier, CUPE was granted a meeting, but in camera, to comply with the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Multiple QP members, including the president, were asked to leave the meeting while QP 5428 presented their concerns. In British Columbia, from David P. Ball, LJI reporter at Indigen News, the Hatsel First Nation has asked a judge for an urgent injunction to prevent the expansion of a tailings dam that previously failed in 2014. The community argues transparency failures regarding safety reports significantly threaten their land and water security. Nearly 11 years ago, the mine's previous tailings dam collapsed, dumping 25 million cubic meters of toxic waste and water into the local watershed. It was rebuilt, but there is question on the legality of those permits, which the provincial government issued without requiring a new environmental assessment or Indigenous consultation. Next, we turn to privacy issues continuing to make headlines across Canada. From Bob Mackin, LJI reporter at Prince George Citizen, an arbitrator recently ruled that an Alberta company violated employee privacy by conducting unauthorized drug and alcohol tests, raising important questions about workplace surveillance and consent. The test was ordered after the employee suffered a minor injury where he rolled his ankle and saw a physician who recommended rest. It was determined the company did not establish a significant incident warranting an inquiry into post-incident testing. Meanwhile, a new study reveals 2/3 of Canadians have experimented with generative AI, but few fully understand its privacy implications. Only 36% were familiar with the rules and ethics around Gen AI. Experts warn this knowledge gap could put users at risk as AI technology rapidly advances. Meanwhile, 67% worry Gen AI could be used to manipulate voters or interfere with democratic processes. On a separate note, the growing field of personalized medicine promises major breakthroughs in healthcare, but also creates significant privacy concerns regarding sensitive medical data. Analysts emphasize the urgent need for stronger data protection frameworks to prepare for this new era. Companies have varying regulatory standards regarding this data, which raises concerns over what happens to it if a company becomes financially unstable or ceases to exist. This recently occurred when genetic testing company 23andMe filed for bankruptcy. Additionally, Vancouver's police board announced it will release a report in June addressing allegations of arrest quotas, an issue spotlighting broader concerns about transparency and fairness in policing practices. According to a whistleblower, the department arbitrarily set arrest quotas as part of the mayor's Task Force Barrage, an initiative in the downtown east side to crack down on drug-related and other violence and crime. Finally, investigators tackling conflict-related sexual assault cases are increasingly using advanced technology to gather evidence, sparking debates about the balance between privacy rights and effective prosecution. Concerns from survivors have arisen over how data will be handled, and if their identities and stories could be revealed through hacking or poor data handling, which could put them at risk of reprisals from perpetrators or their accomplices. To address these concerns, international courts and investigative bodies have adopted data protection protocols. However, the lack of a standardized framework for the use of technology in the investigation of conflict-related sexual violence remains a significant concern. Shifting to the United States, President Trump's influence continues to impact transparency and governance. Trump's budgetary legacy includes cuts to research ranging from AI literacy programs to even bird feeder studies, raising concerns about long-term implications for scientific transparency. The cuts are to comply with Trump's directives to end support of research on diversity, equity, and inclusion, as well as the study of misinformation. Along with eliminating DEI research, the National Science Foundation said it will no longer support research with the goal of combating misinformation that could be considered, quote, infringing on the constitutionally protected speech rights of American citizens across the United States, end quote. In related court news, a U.S. appellate court has upheld restrictions on DOJ accessing Social Security data, blocking transparency advocates who argue this prevents oversight of potential abuses and protecting the privacy of citizens. Earlier, DOJ was issued a preliminary injunction, which was brought by a group of labor unions and retirees who allege DOJ's recent actions violate privacy laws and present massive information security risks. Meanwhile, a leaked draft from Wisconsin Supreme Court on abortion rights remains unresolved, highlighting persistent concerns over judicial transparency. The leak of a draft order last June showed the court would take a case brought by Planned Parenthood, which is seeking to declare access to abortion a right protected by the state constitution. The report did conclude that the draft order had been forwarded to the personal email account of one of the 4 liberal justices on the court who voted to hear the abortion case. And in Iowa, the governor is suing the Des Moines Register, resisting disclosure of emails she claims are protected, a move transparency advocates say undermines accountability. A reporter submitted a records request in February to Governor Kim Reynolds' office, according to the complaint. In response, the Republican governor's office provided 825 pages of relevant documents and withheld 4 emails, asserting they were protected because they were intended to be confidential. Moving to more international stories, millions in Spain and Portugal were recently impacted by significant power outages. Investigations into the reasons are still ongoing. Authorities are now emphasizing improved transparency in crisis planning and public communication strategies for future incidents. In March, the European Union urged all 450 million residents of the 27-nation bloc to stockpile food, water, and other essentials to last at least 72 hours, as war, cyber attacks, climate change, and disease increase the chances of a crisis. In Indonesia, Amnesty International reports increased government crackdowns on public protests, severely restricting freedom of speech and assembly, an alarming trend for global transparency and democratic rights. The rights group said in its annual report on Indonesia that public protests were met with excessive and unnecessary force and arbitrary arrests when thousands of demonstrators took to the streets to protest attempts by the House of Representatives to change the country's election law. And in Slovakia, large-scale public rallies have erupted in response to proposed legislation targeting non-governmental organizations. Critics argue this law could significantly undermine civil society's transparency and independence. People who gathered in Bratislava's Freedom Square compared the measure to Russia's foreign agent law, which has been criticized as repressive. An analysis by Via Iris, a non-profit organization, said the law violates the Constitution, including the right to privacy, freedom of expression, and the right to freely associate, as well as European Union rules. And now finally, we're closely monitoring a troubling case in British Columbia. The Office of the Information and Privacy Commissioner is taking Northern Health Authority to court over alleged refusal to comply with lawful requests for information they had previously agreed to release. This legal action against a public health authority highlights a serious erosion of transparency and accountability in BC's public institutions. FIPA will continue monitoring this important case closely and bring you updates as it develops. As always, we hope today's stories help you stay informed about the latest issues surrounding privacy, information management, and public transparency. To help us keep the mics on, be sure to subscribe to FIPA News Monitoring or consider a donation. Our writer is Sean Fisk. Original music in today's show was composed by the mysterious Breakmaster Cylinder. I'm Patrick Farnsworth, your host and producer. Thank you for joining. A big FIPA thank you to all the contributors, reporters, and outlets that make this podcast possible, and to you, our listeners, who help make this successful. Stay safe and stay informed.